Hi everyone, welcome to the MrpTech Podcast. This is episode 104. My name is Matt, and this is the weekly podcast discussing everyday tech for everyday people. And in this week's episode, open the pod bay doors, CIMON. Over the past week, I have got this topic from my father, who actually caught this, and I totally missed it. And I'm glad he mentioned it to me, because just this past week, well, maybe a week and a half or so ago now, SpaceX launched a commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station. And what was different about this particular launch was it was launched in a Dragon cargo ship directly to the International Space Station. And on that was food and supplies for the astronauts aboard the space station, but something that was much different than any other flight before is that an 11-pound robot called CIMON, which stands for Crew Interactive Mobile Companion, was also launched. And that's what I'm going to talk about in today's episode. We're going to talk about what that means. CIMON is an artificially intelligent robot that is now aboard the International Space Station, and what it's going to do for the crew members aboard the ISS. So just before dawn, SpaceX launched a spaceship, nearly 6,000 pounds of cargo, and as I mentioned before, is a commercial resupply mission. Part of that launch was this orb-shaped device called CIMON, probably a little bigger than a basketball. And one of the things that I did is I posted the link in our Discord page and showed a picture of CIMON. And CIMON can move around the space station at will and uses IBM Watson software to talk with an animated face and interact with the astronauts aboard the space station to assist them in various tasks. So my first thought upon hearing this was 2001: The Space Odyssey with HAL 9000, and I'm sure most people out there are thinking similar ideas when it comes to an artificially intelligent robot in space. So here's what CIMON is going to do. CIMON is nowhere near in the capabilities of HAL. But in this case, CIMON's brain is powered by Watson. That's the famous software that defeated the Jeopardy champions Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter in 2011 to win $1 million. Basically, the whole project is a research project to see how well astronauts can get along with an artificially intelligent being for extended periods of time, so that, just like anything else on the space station, testing for longer duration flights in space. So before we get into what CIMON's primary mission is, CIMON was basically created by the German Aerospace Center and another group, the European Space Agency, and a few other partners around the world. And at first, the robot is only going to be working with German astronaut Alexander Gerst, who launched to the space station on June 6th. So over the last few months, CIMON has been trained to recognize Gerst's voice via microphones and his face using cameras. So the machine is actually going to follow him around sort of like a dog would, using an air propulsion system. It has a series of, I believe, 12 different fans that will propel this robot around the space station. CIMON is not actually connected directly to the internet. It has a standalone version of Watson AI in its memory banks, and it can interpret data, respond to problems, and be useful without really an internet connection, because that can be a little tricky when it comes to space travel. When you're traveling farther distances where you're not going to have an internet connection, let's say, you need to be able to problem solve on the fly, so to speak. So currently, the CIMON robot will be used throughout October, and then will be returning to Earth in December. Has three basic missions. One is a crystal growth experiment. The next is for CIMON to look at a Rubik's Cube through its camera and give the astronaut instructions how to solve it. And the final task is to assist an astronaut while he performs a complex medical experiment. If you want to think of all the experiments on the space station, a great video to watch would be the tour of the International Space Station. There's several available on YouTube, and you can see that most of the walls on the space station are ongoing experiments by the various teams from all over the world that are on the space station. And most of the time when these experiments are ongoing, they can consist of over 100 different steps that the astronauts have to carefully progress through. And CIMON will know them all so that it can aid in the astronauts, and the astronauts won't have to worry about making a mistake and skipping a step. CIMON is also equipped with sensors that can tell the astronauts when there might be possibly a dangerous situation and they're not near their computer. So CIMON can also be quite the help in emergency situations as well. So with the sensors that he has, he can sort of detect technical problems before they become really dangerous. Over time, CIMON will sort of get upgrades through software, and we'll be able to monitor astronauts and assess their emotional states and psychological states as well. And this ultimately could lead to learning how to program future robotic assistants for long-term journeys such as the moon or Mars, or even beyond, to long-term missions in the future as we learn to colonize the solar system and maybe even beyond. It's not only the hope of NASA and all these other teams that the German agencies and the European space agencies to assist astronauts, but this technology may as well return back to the ground and help things like hospitals or nursing care, that type of thing. So we have artificially intelligent robots helping in that case too. So it's kind of an interesting concept, and I want to kind of go into some of my thoughts behind this and why I think it's important, why I think it's not as scary as one might think. And if you think about long-term space missions, you have to have something that can improve efficiency and the overall mood of everyone on board, crew morale, that type of thing. And having an artificially intelligent robot would solve a lot of those issues, especially the long hours or months, weeks, maybe even years to the destination that the astronauts might be headed to. CIMON currently can't assist with any physical tasks, but does feature a language user interface allowing crews to talk to it, and the robot itself can display repair instructions on the screens and even search for objects on board. Hopefully, this will result in more free time for the astronauts, a little bit less stress, and more rest and relaxation, those types of things. I'm actually really impressed with how the amount of time that it took to develop CIMON. Really was only developed in the last couple of years, and it cost $8.1 million to build. So it's not like they've been working on this for over a decade or something like this. This is a relatively new project that has gone from an idea to in production and in use in 2 years. So that's pretty incredible in itself. It was designed from the heads up to from the very beginning to feature no sharp edges, so it doesn't pose any threat to equipment or crew. And should it start to go the way of 2001: A Space Odyssey and say something similar to those, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave, the robot is equipped with a kill switch, so they can turn it off if need be. That's the thought in everybody's mind. But it has been programmed with a personality. It's sensing, it's thinking, it's judging, and reacts to whatever is happening around it. The face that's on board will actually respond to the moods of the astronauts. So if the astronauts' moods are happy, you will see a smile on Simon's face. If something is very stressful or even sad, they will have Simon will have a frown as well. As I mentioned before, it's going to likely change over time as it receives software updates from IBM's cloud. Currently, the idea is, if you want to put it in perspective, it should behave sort of like an R2 droid from Star Wars. It should be relatively useful, a worker, and supposedly it can even quotes famous sci-fi movies. So it's an interesting concept. And what better place to test it than the International Space Station? So let's get into some of my thoughts. So my first thought when I saw the picture and the cartoon type face that this robot has, it's very disturbing, in my opinion, the face. Being in an isolated environment, I think I would be a little freaked out over this artificial intelligence following me around the whole way. And Simon only weighs 5 kilograms in microgravity, so it will float around and move around on its own. And it's connected, its microphones are connected to the ground. Apparently there is a privacy setting for times when they don't want the microphones broadcasting back to Earth. But that offline mode is kind of a funny thing. And, you know, I'm not so sure that I'd want this thing floating around all the time. You know, one thing that I think would be kind of cool is if it had sort of like a Roomba feature, you know, the vacuum cleaner feature where your vacuum cleans your house and then goes back to a dock. You know, I wonder if that's what it does, if it has a predetermined sort of docking station where it should be when it's not being used. I have to learn a little bit more about that and see exactly what might be happening there. But basically, like I said, its main mission is to support the astronauts in their daily tasks. And the hope is to put this to good use of the technology of artificial intelligence. And this is all, of course, just an experiment, and we'll have no idea how well it will work. And over time, improvements will be made. But is it going to be something that is useful in the long term? So here's how an astronaut would approach using CIMON. Let's take Alexander Gersh, for example, the astronaut that's going to be working with it. He can say, "Simon, could you please help me perform a certain experiment? Could you please give me some help with this procedure?" And Simon will fly towards the astronaut, and they will already have started talking to each other based on the interaction that was said to him. So Simon can access schematics, it can access photos and videos, procedure information, and it's smart enough to deal with these questions just beyond the general list of actions. So if you think about Siri isn't really designed to interact on a high scale at this point. Most of the AI that we're using currently doesn't have that ability. So this is a step up from what we normally would expect something with AI to have and to possess. So it's kind of cool. One thing that it is not capable of doing, it is not at all capable of doing things such as repairing spacecraft systems or treating sick crew members. But in the future, that might change. That might be something that can happen in the future. But the most important thing to keep in mind is that in deep space, you cannot take things like engineers with you. You cannot take the most bright and intelligent people with you. So you need to have something like this in order to create a better chance of success in those deep space missions. So CIMON is really fascinating to me. I love the idea that they're experimenting on the space station. I love the idea that it actually has tasks to do already, and that it is functional already. I don't think that if I was on the space station that I would want to be in charge of this just yet. But it is a whole lot of fun to read about, that's for sure. It's amazing to me that all of the things that are in science fiction over the last 60 years have been coming true at a more rapid pace, what seems like in the last few years. We've got things like, the tablet interface from Star Trek, or the communicators from Star Trek, or artificial intelligence now coming into play, augmented reality coming into play. It's pretty awesome, the things that have been rolling out, and I'm really even more excited when the next line of telescopes will launch over the next few years. What are they going to provide to all of us in terms of finding life in the universe, or destinations that we may travel to in the long-term future? And what will the role of these artificially intelligent robots play in all of that? If you'd like to learn more about CIMON, you can do a quick search on YouTube. There are several videos, some put up by Sci News, other ITV News, and several other channels that talk about CIMON, what it does, and what it can do. Check them out; they're really interesting, and I'm curious what you all think about CIMON. And let me know if this is something you're interested in. You can send me an email, mrptechreviews@gmail.com, and send me some feedback on any episode that you listened to recently. If you're a new listener, say hello. You can join us. We have a Discord chat room set up that we use pretty much in between all of the shows. And it's a great place for anyone who's interested in tech stuff to come and talk with other tech-minded people. And the chat room is not just talking about tech, it's really open to any type of discussion. So feel free to stop by that. If you want a link to the Discord room, you can go to my website. It's mrptechreviews.com, and just scroll down until you see the Discord button, and we will give you a link to the Discord chat room. And feel free to join in on that, because it's a really great place. Just a couple other things to talk about. Also on the website is the link to the Amazon affiliate program that I'm involved with. Basically what that does, if you click on that Amazon link on my website, that'll bring you directly to Amazon. If you purchase an item, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but it'll give me a small kickback as being a part of the Amazon affiliate program. And it's a little bit of ways that I can make some money off of this, doing this show week after week, but without you having to spend any extra money or extra money from your budget to support us. So I would appreciate it if next time that you maybe think about buying something on Amazon, go to the website and click that link first and support the show. That would be really awesome. There are other ways you can support the show too. You can go to patreon.com/mrptech. That's our Patreon page. And we also just have a donate button. So if you feel the urge and you have a few extra bucks here and there, send it my way, because everything that I sort of make from this show will go right back into making this show better, whether it's testing and reviewing hardware or software, or just keeping infrastructure running. Everything in my system is running pretty well at this point, but everything ages, everything fails at some point. So having that extra little bit of funding helps and goes a long way. Also, the best way you can support me has nothing to do with money at all. You can tell other people about the show and tell other people to listen. This show is meant for really anybody interested in technology topics. It is for students, for other teachers. It is for anyone in the general public, even professionals, if they want to just listen to an educator talk about technology topics. That's what this show is all about. So feel free to share the show with anybody you know, and we'd love to have more listeners. I appreciate everybody listening to the show. Over the next few months, we're going to try to keep doing the episodes weekly over the summer. Again, if you have been listening to the last few episodes, my summer schedule is very busy, but I'm going to still try to stick with a weekly release. So hopefully that's the case. And if I miss a week or two over the summer, no worries there. Just remember, we'll be back up and running in September with weekly episodes. With that, you can also check out all the great shows on Podnuts. There are lots of different shows to check out. If you like Android topics, you can check out Android App Addicts. You check out the Computer Repair Podcast, Linux for the Rest of Us. There's a mini PC show, The Makers. The list goes on and on and on. There's lots of great shows on the Podnuts network. I like to give them all a plug once in a while. If you're new to listening to this show, maybe you want to check out some of those shows as well. And thanks to Podnuts for supporting me and my efforts with creating a weekly podcast. I couldn't do it without them, and very much appreciate it. So that's going to do it for this week, guys. I'm going to wrap up the show. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.